It is midnight in the year 1300. You are lying in a small cottage in northern Europe. Outside, the wind howls like a hungry wolf through the gaps in the timber walls. There is no thermostat to turn up. The only warmth comes from the dying embers of a central hearth, sending a thin ribbon of smoke toward the thatched roof. You pull a heavy, scratchy wool blanket closer to your chin, but the damp cold still seeps into your bones. Your breath mists in the air before you. Beside you, your family and even the livestock huddle close, sharing their body heat in the absolute darkness. How did people endure these brutal, freezing nights for centuries? Tonight, we step back into the shadows of the Middle Ages to discover the clever and sometimes surprising ways our ancestors stayed warm while the world froze outside. Imagine for a moment that the sun has just dipped below the horizon, and it is not even 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You are standing in the center of a small village in northern Europe during the 14th century. The air does not just feel cold. It feels heavy, a physical weight pressing against your chest that makes every breath a sharp, stinging reminder of the season. There are no street lights here. There are no glowing shop windows or hum of distant electricity. There is only the vast, encroaching purple of the twilight and the absolute, terrifying silence of a world that has been frozen solid. As you stand in the mud of the village path, which has hardened into treacherous, bone-breaking ridges of ice, you look around at the small cluster of homes. To our modern eyes, they hardly look like houses at all. They look like organic growths emerging from the earth, mounds of straw and dried mud that seem to be huddling together for warmth just as the people inside are doing. These are cruck houses, built from massive curved timbers and walls of wattle and daub. The thatched roofs are thick, heavy with layers of straw added over decades, and right now, they are dusted with a fine, glittering powder of snow that refuses to melt. You begin to walk toward your own home, and the only sound is the crunch of your leather shoes on the frost. You are wearing every piece of clothing you own. Beneath your heavy wool tunic, you have a linen shirt and perhaps another layer of older, tattered wool. Your legs are wrapped in hose, and your hands are tucked into your sleeves because gloves are a luxury you cannot afford. Even with these layers, the chill finds the gaps, creeps up your spine and settles in your joints. In the Middle Ages, winter was not a season you enjoyed from the comfort of a heated room. It was an adversary you negotiated with every single hour of the day and night. You reach the door of your house. It is low, forcing you to stoop as you enter, and it is thick, made of heavy oak planks. As you pull it shut behind you and drop the wooden latch, the world changes. The wind is cut off, but the cold remains. It is a different kind of cold inside. It is damp and earthy, smelling of old smoke, dried herbs, and the distinctive pungent musk of livestock. In the center of the room, there is a circular patch of stones. This is your hearth. There is no chimney in this house. Instead, the smoke from the small, flickering fire rises toward the ceiling, drifting through the blackened rafters before eventually seeping out through a hole in the thatch or through the porous walls themselves. This means that as you stand there, the air is thick and hazy. Your eyes sting slightly, but you do not mind the smoke. To a person in the Middle Ages, the smell of wood smoke was the smell of safety. It meant the fire was alive, but the fire is dying. It is the time of the curfew. The word curfew comes from the French phrase couvre-feu, which literally means cover fire. This is not just a rule made by a local lord to keep people off the streets. It is a vital safety measure. In a house made of dry straw, wood, and flammable resin, a runaway fire in the middle of the night is a death sentence not just for your family, but for the entire village. So you take a heavy ceramic lid or simply use a pile of ash to bank the glowing embers. You do not put the fire out completely, for starting a fire from scratch in the morning is a grueling task, but you dampen it so it smolders low and slow. Now, the only light comes from the faint orange glow beneath the ashes and perhaps a single, sputtering rushlight. A rushlight is a clever, humble invention. You have taken a common meadow rush, peeled back the skin to reveal the pith, and soaked it in leftover animal fat or tallow. It gives off a tiny, flickering flame and a greasy, fatty smell, but it is enough to help you see the faces of your family. You look around the single room that makes up your entire world. In one corner, separated perhaps by a low wooden partition or nothing at all, are your animals. You can hear the rhythmic, heavy breathing of an ox and the occasional rustle of a few sheep. This might seem revolting to a modern person, but in the depths of a medieval winter, those animals are your most precious heaters. A single cow produces a tremendous amount of body heat, and in a small, enclosed space, that heat rises and mingles with the warmth of the humans. The animals are not just your livelihood. They are your furnace. As you prepare for sleep, you do not change into pajamas. The idea of stripping off layers in this temperature is unthinkable. Instead, you might remove your outermost, mud-stained tunic, but you keep your hose and your linen undergarments on. You might even pull a woolen hood over your head. Most of the heat leaves through the scalp, and a person sleeping without a head covering in a freezing hovel would wake up with a brutal chill, if they woke up at all. Your bed is not a mattress of foam or springs. It is a simple wooden frame, or perhaps just a designated area on the raised earthen floor, piled high with straw. This straw is changed only a few times a year, and it is home to a microscopic ecosystem of its own. But tonight, it serves as insulation. You climb into the straw, feeling it crunch and poke through your clothes, and you beckon to your family. In the Middle Ages, the idea of a private bedroom was a foreign concept to the vast majority of the population. You sleep together. You, your spouse, your children, and perhaps an elderly parent or a sibling, all huddle together under the same heavy coverings. These coverings are usually made of thick, coarse wool that has been felted or boiled to make it wind-resistant. It is heavy, smelling of lanolin and the sweat of many winters, but beneath its weight, the combined body heat of 4 or 5 people begins to create a small, fragile microclimate of warmth. You lie there in the dark, and the silence of the village returns. Outside, the frost is tightening its grip, turning the world into a landscape of iron and glass. You can hear the timber frame of the house groan as the wood contracts in the cold. Sounds like the house is breathing, or perhaps complaining. You listen to the soft lowing of the ox in the corner and the rhythmic breathing of your children beside you. This is the reality of the medieval night. It is a time of sensory deprivation and intense physical proximity. You are hyper-aware of the cold just inches away from your cocoon of wool and straw. You know that if the fire goes out completely, the morning will be a struggle for survival. You know that the water in the bucket by the door has already begun to skim over with a layer of ice. But for now, you are tucked away. The thick walls of mud and straw, which you spent the summer repairing, are holding back the worst of the northern wind. The darkness is absolute, a thick, velvety blackness that we rarely experience in our world of LEDs and street lamps. In this darkness, your other senses sharpen. You smell the dry rot of the thatch, the sweetness of the hay, the salt of the cured meat hanging from the rafters, and the comforting, earthy scent of the banked hearth. This segment of our journey is about understanding that first, vital step of the winter night, the retreat. It is the moment when the humans of the Middle Ages admitted that the sun had abandoned them and that their only defense against the crushing cold was each other and the dying embers of the hearth. As you drift off to sleep in this imagined hovel, the freezing air of the 14th century nipping at the tip of your nose, you begin to realize that staying warm was not just a chore. It was an art form. It was a communal effort that defined the very structure of their homes, their families, and their daily lives. The night is long, and the dawn is many hours away. The fire is now nothing more than a memory of heat beneath a pile of gray ash, and the hamlet has surrendered to the winter. But the people inside are still breathing, still dreaming, and still fighting the great dark with nothing but wool, straw, and the warmth of their own hearts. This was the beginning of the long wait for the sun, a cycle of survival that played out every single year for centuries. In the next part of our story, we will look closer at the strange and ingenious tools they used to bridge the gap between the frozen floor and the morning light. You step toward the small, low-slung cottage that will be your refuge for the night. The winter sun has already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky the color of bruised plums. The air is so cold it feels like a physical weight against your chest, and every breath you draw sends a plume of white mist swirling into the darkness. To you, the house looks almost like it grew out of the earth itself. There are no sharp lines or polished stones here. Instead, the walls are thick, undulating, and covered in a layer of pale, dried mud that seems to glow faintly in the twilight. This is a house built of wattle and daub, a construction method that has been the backbone of human shelter for thousands of years, and tonight, it is the only thing standing between you and a freezing death. As you reach out to touch the exterior wall, your fingers meet a surface that is surprisingly hard and slightly rough. Feels more like stone than wood. This is the daub. Beneath this outer shell lies the wattle, a hidden skeleton of flexible wooden stakes, usually made of hazel or willow, woven together like a giant, upright basket. Imagine the effort that went into this. A person had to cut hundreds of these slender branches and weave them tightly between thick vertical posts. Once the basket-like structure was firm, the daub was applied. You can still see the faint imprints of the fingers and palms that pressed this mixture into place months or years ago. The daub itself is a recipe for survival. It is a coarse mixture of clay, soil, straw, and often animal dung. While the idea of living in a house made of waste might seem unappealing to a modern mind, it was a stroke of engineering genius. The straw provided tensile strength, much like the rebar in modern concrete, preventing the mud from cracking as it dried. The animal dung, rich in fibrous material and certain chemical binders, helped the mixture adhere to the wooden wattle. Most importantly, once this thick sludge dried and was coated in a layer of lime wash, it became an incredible thermal mass. You push open the heavy wooden door, which creaks on its leather hinges, and step inside. The transition is immediate and jarring. The biting wind is cut off instantly, replaced by an air that is heavy, still, and thick with a cocktail of scents. There is the sharp tang of wood smoke, the earthy smell of the walls, and the sweet, fermented scent of old straw. But above all else, you feel the heat. It is not the dry, aggressive heat of a modern furnace, but a soft, radiating warmth that seems to seep out of the very fabric of the building. In the center of the room, a fire is crackling in a shallow pit on the floor. There is no chimney. Instead, the smoke rises and curls around the rafters, slowly filtering out through the thick thatch of the roof or a small hole in the gables. This might seem like a flaw in the design, but it is actually a crucial part of the heating strategy. As the smoke rises, it creates a layer of warm air just below the ceiling. This heat does not just vanish. It is absorbed by the thick wattle and daub walls. Throughout the day, as the fire burned to cook the midday pottage, these walls were acting like a thermal battery. The dense mud and clay soaked up the energy of the flames, storing it deep within their mass. Now that the sun has set and the temperature outside is plummeting towards zero, the walls are beginning to give that heat back. If you were to press your back against the interior wall right now, you would feel a gentle, lingering warmth. This is the secret of the medieval home. It is not about generating a massive amount of heat all at once, but about capturing every single calorie of energy and holding onto it for as long as possible. You look down at your feet and notice that you are not standing on bare earth. The floor is covered in a thick layer of dried rushes and straw. In some places, it is nearly a foot deep. This serves a dual purpose. First, it provides a soft surface to walk on, but more importantly, it acts as a layer of insulation against the frozen ground. The earth beneath the house is cold and damp, and without this carpet of vegetation, the floor would sap the heat from your body within minutes. Beneath the fresh top layer of straw, there are older layers that have been packed down over time, creating a dense, insulating mat that keeps the rising cold of the winter soil at bay. As you move deeper into the room, you hear a rhythmic, heavy sound. It is a slow, wet breath followed by the rustle of straw. You turn your head and see a pair of large, dark eyes reflecting the orange glow of the fire. In the corner of the house, separated from the main living area by only a low wooden rail or a thin wicker screen, are the family's cows. In many medieval longhouses, the humans and the livestock shared the same roof. To your modern sensibilities, the idea of sleeping 10 feet away from a cow or a few pigs might be horrifying, but in the depths of a 14th century winter, these animals were literal lifesavers. A single cow produces a staggering amount of body heat, roughly equivalent to a medium-sized space heater running constantly. By bringing the animals inside, the medieval family was utilizing a biological furnace. The heat from the cattle would rise and mingle with the heat from the hearth, helping to keep the entire interior of the cottage several degrees above the freezing point. The animals also benefited, as they were protected from the wolves and the lethal frost of the open fields. It was a symbiotic relationship built on the necessity of staying alive. You look up at the ceiling, or rather, the underside of the roof. There is no flat plaster here, just the dark, soot-stained underside of the thatch. The thatch is made of layers upon layers of wheat straw or water reeds, sometimes reaching a thickness of 2 feet. This is perhaps the most effective insulation in the entire structure. Each hollow straw traps a tiny pocket of air. Multiplied by millions, these air pockets create a barrier that is incredibly difficult for heat to penetrate. The warm air rising from the fire and the animals gets trapped in the irregular texture of the thatch, creating a warm microclimate in the upper reaches of the room. However, even with these ingenious defenses, the winter is a persistent enemy. You notice that there are no glass windows in this house. Glass is a luxury for the church and the extremely wealthy. Instead, there are small, narrow openings cut into the wattle and daub. These are covered with wooden shutters that are currently bolted tight against the wind. To further seal the gaps, the family may have stretched translucent animal membranes, like a pig's bladder or a piece of oiled linen, across the openings. These let in a ghostly, diffused light during the day but do a poor job of stopping the cold. To combat the drafts that whistle through the cracks in the door and the window shutters, heavy woolen blankets or even old tapestries are hung against the walls and over the entrances. These fabrics catch the moving air and create a buffer zone, preventing the precious warmth of the hearth from being stripped away by a sudden gust. The sun is long gone now, and the family begins the ritual of preparing for the night. The fire, which was dancing brightly an hour ago, is now being carefully managed. This is the time of the curfew, a word derived from the French couvre-feu, meaning cover fire. Using a metal lid or a mound of ash, the father carefully covers the glowing embers. He does not want the fire to burn brightly all night, as that would waste precious wood and pose a fire hazard while everyone sleeps. Instead, he wants to keep the coals smoldering. This way, the heat will continue to bleed out slowly into the room, and in the morning, he can easily blow the embers back into a flame. You realize that in this environment, you do not exist as an individual separate from the house. You are part of an ecosystem. The walls, the floor, the animals, and the fire are all working together to create a pocket of survival in a world that has turned to ice. The house is a living thing, breathing in the warmth of the day and slowly exhaling it through the long, dark hours of the night. You feel a sense of profound stillness. Outside, the world is sharpening into a lethal frost, but inside these walls of mud and straw, the last of the day's heat is being held in a tight, protective embrace. You find a spot near the center of the room, away from the drafty door, and prepare to settle in, knowing that the very walls around you are fighting to keep you warm. You step further into the room, and the first thing that hits you is not just the heat, but the smell. It is a thick, heavy aroma that defines every winter of your life. It is the scent of seasoned oak and damp peat, mixed with the faint, metallic tang of wood smoke and the musk of a dozen or more bodies huddled together for survival. In the center of the great hall, the hearth sits like a pulsing orange sun. This is not the tucked-away fireplace you might imagine in a modern home, set neatly into a wall with a brick chimney to whisk the smoke away. No, this is a primitive, powerful thing. It is a raised stone platform, perhaps a foot above the floor, where the fire burns openly, its light reaching out to touch every corner of the vast, timbered room. As you move closer to the warmth, you feel the biting chill of the stone floor begin to recede. The heat hits your face first, a sudden and aggressive embrace that makes your skin prickle and your eyes water. You find a place on the thick layers of straw and rushes that carpet the floor, positioning yourself just close enough to feel the radiation of the embers, but far enough away to avoid the stray sparks that occasionally leap from the logs. You are not alone in this search for the hot zone. All around you, the household is gathering. The social hierarchy of the Middle Ages is usually rigid, but in the dead of winter, the fire is a great equalizer. While the lord and lady may have their high table and perhaps a slightly more elevated sleeping platform, everyone is drawn to this single point of light. You look up, and your eyes follow the thick pillars of smoke as they rise toward the ceiling. In a world before the widespread use of chimneys, the smoke does not have a clear path of exit. It drifts upward, filling the cavernous space of the rafters, creating a permanent, shifting cloud of gray and blue that hangs over your head. High above, there is a louver, a small, slatted opening in the roof designed to let the smoke escape while keeping the snow and rain out. But the wind is strong tonight. You can hear it howling against the thatch and timber, and occasionally, a gust pushes back down through the louver, sending a swirl of soot and cold air dancing into the hall. The smoke never truly leaves. It clings to the tapestries. It seasons the meat hanging from the beams, and it settles into your clothes and hair until you smell like the fire itself. The fire is the only thing standing between you and the lethal temperatures of the darkness outside. You watch as a servant, his face flushed red from the heat, heaves another massive log onto the pile. This is oak, the king of winter fuels. It burns slowly and holds its heat for hours, creating a bed of glowing coals that will stay hot long after the flames have died down. You listen to the sounds of the hearth. There is the sharp, gunshot crack of a pocket of sap exploding, the soft hiss of moisture escaping the wood, and the low, rhythmic roar of the draft pulling air toward the flames. It is a hypnotic sound, one that serves as the heartbeat of the hall. As you settle into your spot, you notice the way the light behaves. It is not the steady, sterile glow of a lamp. It is a living thing that breathes and dances. The shadows of the great pillars leap and stretch across the stone walls, making the entire hall feel as though it is moving. You see the glint of firelight on the iron hinges of the heavy doors and the dull shimmer of the Lord's silver cup on the high table. Everything in the room is defined by its relationship to the hearth. The further you move from this circle of orange light, the more the world becomes cold and dangerous. You begin to arrange your bedding. In the Middle Ages, sleeping is rarely a solitary affair. You are surrounded by your family, your fellow servants, or your comrades in arms. You pull a heavy woolen cloak around your shoulders, feeling the weight of the fabric. It is coarse and scratchy, but it is thick. You tuck your feet toward the fire, careful to keep your boots away from the direct heat so the leather does not crack. To your left and right, other people are doing the same. You feel the warmth of another person's shoulder against yours, and in this environment, you do not pull away. Human body heat is a precious commodity, a secondary hearth that helps keep the blood flowing when the fire begins to dip in the early hours of the morning. The conversation in the hall begins to quiet as the night deepens. People talk in low, hushed tones, their voices muffled by the heavy blankets and the vastness of the room. They tell stories of the harvest, of saints, and of the strange creatures that are said to roam the woods when the sun goes down. But eventually, even the stories fade, replaced by the collective breathing of a dozen sleeping souls and the occasional crackle of the logs. You realize that the fire is more than just a source of heat. It is a psychological shield. In a world where the winter night can last 16 hours or more, the darkness is a heavy, physical presence. The hearth creates a sanctuary of visibility, a small pocket of the known world in a vast and frozen unknown. You watch the person responsible for the fire, the one who will stay awake or wake up periodically to ensure the embers do not die. This task is a sacred trust. If the fire goes out in the middle of a blizzard, the temperature in the hall will drop precipitously, and the morning will bring a bone-deep cold that is difficult to shake. You see them use a long iron poker to shift the logs, sending a fountain of golden sparks upward into the smoke cloud. They are careful, methodical. They might use a couvre-feu, a metal cover with holes in it, to place over the embers. This device, which eventually gave us the word curfew, is designed to keep the fire smoldering safely overnight without burning through all the fuel too quickly. It prevents a stray spark from landing on the dry straw of the floor while everyone sleeps. The air in the hall is dry and tastes of ash. You feel a slight sting in your throat, a common ailment for anyone living in a medieval winter. But you prefer the sting of the smoke to the bite of the frost. You can see your breath in the air if you turn your head away from the fire toward the outer walls. The difference in temperature between the center of the room and the edges is staggering. Near the walls, the frost may actually be forming on the inside of the stones, a delicate and deadly lace of ice. But here, near the hearth, you are wrapped in a cocoon of warmth. You close your eyes, and the orange glow remains burned into your eyelids. You feel the rhythm of the house settling. A dog, a large, shaggy creature used for hunting, trots across the straw and flops down near your feet, seeking its own place in the warmth. Its presence is welcome. It is another layer of heat, another living thing huddling against the winter. You drift in and out of a light sleep, always conscious of the fire. You feel the moment a new log is added, the subtle change in the air as the flames lick higher. You feel the shift in the wind outside as it batters the roof, and you feel the immense weight of the season. In this moment, you understand that the hearth is not just a feature of the architecture. It is the very definition of home. In the old languages, the word for hearth and the word for home were often one and armchair the same. Without this fire, this hall is just a cold, empty shell of stone and wood. With it, it is a fortress of life. You pull your cloak tighter, the smell of oak smoke filling your senses, and you finally let sleep take you, anchored by the steady, reassuring pulse of the great hall's heart. You know that as long as that glow remains, the winter cannot reach you. The night may be long, and the world outside may be frozen solid, but here, in the circle of the hearth, the spirit of summer is kept alive in the dancing flames. The darkness is kept at bay, and for now, that is enough to survive another night in the heart of the Middle Ages. The fire in the center of the room has settled into a low, pulsing glow of orange embers. The heat that once pushed back against the walls has retreated, leaving the air sharp and thin. You can see your own breath hitching in the dim light, a tiny cloud of silver mist that vanishes as quickly as it appears. The floorboards or the packed earth beneath your feet feel like ice, and the dampness of the winter night seems to be seeping through the very soles of your shoes. In this moment, the thought of a solitary bed, cold and empty, is not a luxury. It is a terrifying prospect. To sleep alone in a medieval winter is to invite the frost to settle in your marrow. You need more than just a blanket. You need the living, breathing heat of your fellow humans. You walk toward the back of the hall or into the small partitioned corner where the family gathers for the night. There you see the great communal bed. For the wealthy, this might be a massive wooden frame with turned posts and a heavy canopy. For you, it is likely a simpler affair, perhaps a large wooden box filled with straw, or a series of thick pallets laid out on a raised platform to keep the sleepers away from the drafts that snake across the floor. You do not see a single pillow or a single set of sheets. Instead, you see a collective nest, a carefully constructed mountain of wool, linen, and straw designed to trap every scrap of warmth generated by the human body. You begin the process of settling in. There is a specific choreography to this communal sleep. You do not simply flop down wherever you like. In a family setting, there is an established order. The parents usually take the center or the most protected side, with the children tucked in around them like small birds in a burrow. If there are elders in the house, they are given the spots closest to where the residual heat of the hearth lingers. You find your place and slide beneath the heavy layers. The first thing you notice is the texture of the bedding. If your family is fortunate, the mattress is a large sack known as a tick, stuffed with fresh straw, pea hulls, or even dried heather. It crunches and groans under your weight, releasing the dry, earthy scent of the harvest. Over this, a coarse linen sheet might be spread, but the real protection comes from the blankets. These are not the light, breathable cotton weaves of the modern world. These are heavy, dense slabs of boiled wool. They are scratchy against your skin, and they carry the faint, oily smell of the sheep they came from, but their weight is a comfort. They press down on you, pinning you into the straw and creating a seal that the cold air cannot easily penetrate. As you settle, you feel the person next to you shift. It might be a sibling, a cousin, or a parent. In the 21st century, the idea of sharing a bed with so many people might feel crowded or invasive, but here, in the heart of a 14th century winter, that proximity is your lifeline. You feel the radiant heat of their body beginning to soak into your side. Within minutes, the pocket of air beneath the blankets begins to warm. This is the miracle of the communal bed. Through the simple act of huddling together, you have created a microclimate. The temperature inside this woolen cocoon is 20 or 30 degrees warmer than the air in the rest of the room. The social dynamics of the bed are just as important as the physical warmth. In the Middle Ages, privacy is a concept that barely exists for the common person. Life is lived in public, and sleep is no different. The shared bed is a space of intense bonding. In the quiet moments before sleep takes over, this is where stories are whispered, where the day's labors are discussed, and where the youngest children find security against the howling wind outside. You are part of a pack, a singular unit of survival. The rhythmic breathing of the people around you becomes a lullaby, a constant reminder that you are not facing the darkness alone. But what if you are not at home? Imagine you are a traveler, a merchant, or a pilgrim moving between towns. You reach an inn as the sun begins to fail and the frost begins to bite. You pay your few coins for a night of rest, but those coins do not buy you a private room. They buy you a space in a bed. You walk into the sleeping quarters and find a massive bedstead, sometimes 10 feet wide, already occupied by 3 or 4 other men. There is a strict etiquette to sleeping with strangers. You do not simply crawl in and sprawl out. You enter with a nod of acknowledgement. You keep to your allotted strip of the mattress. You do not toss and turn excessively, and you certainly do not try to hog the communal quilt. It is a strange, temporary brotherhood. You might be sleeping next to a man from a distant province whose dialect you can barely understand, but for this one night you are allies. You lie back to back, or perhaps shoulder to shoulder, and you share the fundamental human necessity of warmth. The Great Bed of Ware, a famous example from a slightly later period, was said to hold as many as 12 people at once. While that was an extreme example, the principle remained the same across the centuries. The more bodies you could pack into a bed, the better your chances of waking up without the sting of frostbite. Even the architecture of the bed itself is designed for heat retention. If you look up, you might see a wooden tester or a fabric canopy. This is not just for decoration. It serves as a roof for your bed, catching the rising heat and reflecting it back down onto the sleepers. Heavy curtains might be pulled shut around the sides, effectively creating a small, soft-walled room within the larger, colder hall. Inside these curtains, the air becomes thick and humid, warmed by the collective breath of half a dozen people. It is a dark, intimate world where the freezing gales of January are nothing more than a distant muffled thud against the stone or timber walls. You might also find a non-human companion at the foot of the bed. The family dog, often used for hunting or guarding during the day, is a prized heater at night. A large hound curled at the feet of the sleepers provides a constant, high-temperature heat source that keeps toes from numbing. In some households, even small livestock might be kept in the same building, their collective body heat helping to raise the overall temperature of the dwelling by a few crucial degrees. As you lie there, drifting toward sleep, you become aware of the sheer physical density of the experience. The straw mattress beneath you is not flat. It has been molded by the bodies of those who sleep there every night, creating hollows and ridges that you naturally slide into. You are cocooned in a landscape of wool and linen, anchored by the weight of your kith and kin. There is a profound sense of safety in this heap of humanity. The night is long, and the winter is unforgiving, but inside the communal bed, the cold is kept at bay. You listen to the sounds of the house, the occasional pop of a cooling ember in the hearth, the creak of the roof timbers as they contract in the freezing air, and the steady, collective heartbeat of your family. You realize that in this world, the bed is more than just a piece of furniture. It is a fortress. It is the place where the vulnerability of the individual is erased by the strength of the group. You are not just a person trying to stay warm. You are a single cell in a larger organism that is determined to see the sunrise. The shared warmth of the communal bed is perhaps the most vivid illustration of medieval life. It represents a world where the boundaries between individuals are blurred by the harsh realities of nature. To survive, you must be close. You must be willing to share your space, your breath, and your heat. As the deep silence of a midwinter night settles over the landscape, and the frost thickens on the window shutters, you pull the heavy wool blanket a little higher, feel the comforting nudge of a shoulder next to yours, and finally allow sleep to take you. The communal fire of the human body is burning bright beneath the covers, and for now, that is all the protection you need. The darkness outside may be vast and cold, but inside this shared nest, the world is small, heavy, and warm. You stand up from the communal bed, your feet pressing into the cold, packed earth of the floor. As you move away from the central hearth, the temperature drops sharply. The air feels like a physical weight against your skin, thin and biting. But as you walk toward the far end of the longhouse, something changes. The air grows thicker. It carries a heavy, humid warmth that does not come from the flickering embers of the fire. It is a biological heat, a living radiance that rises from the shadows at the end of the hall. You are walking toward the byre, the section of the house reserved for the animals, and in the deep of winter, these creatures are the most effective heaters you possess. In the Middle Ages, particularly in Northern and Western Europe, the architecture of survival was often defined by the longhouse or the byre dwelling. This was a single, elongated structure that housed everything a family owned under one roof. There was no garage, no separate barn, and no detached shed. You lived with your wealth, and your wealth breathed. As you approach the partition, which might be nothing more than a low stone wall or a screen of woven wicker, you hear the rhythmic, heavy sounds of life in the dark. There is the slow, grinding sound of a cow chewing its cud, the occasional soft huff of a horse exhaling, and the rustle of straw as a sheep shifts its weight. You lean against the wooden posts, and the warmth hits you in a wave. It is a strange, pungent atmosphere. To a person from the 21st century, the smell would be overwhelming. It is a cocktail of damp hay, dried mud, animal sweat, and the sharp, stinging bite of manure. But to you, a medieval peasant, this smell is not a nuisance. It is the scent of security. In a world where the frost can kill a child in the night, the stench of a healthy cow is the smell of life. Each of these animals is a biological furnace. A single mature cow produces roughly the same amount of heat as a small electric space heater, radiating around several thousand British thermal units every hour. When you have 5 or 6 cows, a few sheep, and perhaps a pig or two packed into a confined space, the collective thermal output is staggering. They are consuming hay, which is essentially stored summer sunlight, and converting it into movement, milk, and most importantly for tonight, heat. This arrangement was not born out of a desire for companionship with the beasts of the field. It was a cold, hard necessity driven by 2 factors, thermodynamics and economics. By bringing the livestock inside, you are using their bodies to preheat the air of your living quarters. The floor of the animal section is often dug a bit lower than the human section, and the floor usually slopes toward a central drain or out a small hole in the wall. This allows the liquid waste to flow away, but the solid manure is often allowed to accumulate throughout the winter, topped with fresh layers of straw. This fermenting pile of bedding actually creates its own heat through decomposition, adding another layer of warmth to the room. But beyond the temperature, there is the matter of protection. In the Middle Ages, your livestock was your bank account. A cow was not just a source of milk. It was the engine that pulled the plow and the source of the manure that fertilized the grain that kept you alive. If a wolf were to break into a separate barn in the middle of a blizzard, or if a group of desperate thieves were to make off with your oxen in the night, your family would likely starve before the next harvest. By sleeping only a few feet away from them, separated by nothing but a thin wall of timber, you become their guardian. You hear every shift in their mood. If a cow becomes restless or a horse whinnies in fear, you are awake in an instant, grabbing a billhook or a staff to defend your livelihood. You watch as the steam rises from the back of a large ox. The animal is a mountain of muscle and hide, and even in the darkness, you can see the white plumes of its breath. In the peak of winter, the temperature outside might be 20 degrees below freezing, but here in the byre it rarely drops below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. This temperature differential is the margin of survival. It means the water troughs do not freeze solid. It means the calves born in the late winter have a chance to live. And it means that when you eventually retreat back to your own bed, the air you breathe has been softened by the presence of these massive, gentle heaters. There is a profound psychological shift that happens when you live this closely with animals. You begin to understand their language. You know the difference between the contented sigh of a full belly and the sharp, nervous stomp of an animal that hears something outside in the woods. In the silence of the winter night, the sounds of the livestock become a sort of white noise, a heartbeat for the house itself. The house is not a dead thing made of wood and stone. It is a living, breathing organism. You might wonder about the health risks. Indeed, living with livestock in such close quarters brought humans into constant contact with parasites and diseases. Tuberculosis, anthrax, and various skin conditions were common. The ammonia levels from the urine could irritate the lungs and eyes of everyone in the house. But in the hierarchy of medieval fears, a respiratory infection was a distant second to the immediate threat of freezing to death. You make a trade with the environment. You accept the filth and the smell in exchange for the gift of their calories. As you stand there in the dark, you might reach out and touch the flank of a cow. Her hide is rough and coarse, but beneath it, you can feel the immense power of her heart and the heat of her blood. She is a radiator made of flesh. In many ways, the medieval winter experience was defined by this blurred line between the human world and the natural world. You did not conquer nature, you huddled with it. You invited the fields and the stalls into your home because you understood that you were all part of the same cycle. The design of these houses was remarkably efficient for the time. The thatched roof, thick with layers of straw and reed, acted as a massive insulator, trapping the rising heat from both the hearth and the animals. Because there were no chimneys in the early Middle Ages, only a hole in the roof, the smoke from the fire would linger in the rafters. This smoke acted as a natural pesticide, killing off many of the vermin that would otherwise nest in the thatch, and it also helped to cure the meat that hung from the beams. The entire environment was a carefully balanced ecosystem where nothing was wasted. The heat of the animals kept the people warm, the smoke of the fire kept the roof from rotting, and the waste of the animals was hauled out in the spring to ensure the next year's crop. You realize that this closeness is why medieval folklore is so populated with animals that speak on Christmas Eve or beasts that have human spirits. When you spend every winter night for your entire life listening to the breathing of cattle just a few feet from your head, they cease to be mere tools. They become the silent witnesses to your life. They see your family grow, they hear your prayers, and they share your struggles. The wind howls outside, rattling the heavy door and whistling through the gaps in the wattle and daub walls. But inside, the air remains still and heavy. The collective warmth of the livestock has created a microclimate that defies the season. You feel a sense of gratitude for these four-legged furnaces. Without them, the house would be a tomb. With them, it is a sanctuary. You turn back toward the human end of the house, your path lit only by the faint orange glow of the banked fire. The transition is subtle but noticeable. The sharp smell of the byre fades, replaced once again by the scent of wood smoke and old wool. But the heat follows you. It drifts through the open partition, a slow, invisible tide of warmth that keeps the frost from creeping across the floorboards. You climb back into the bed, sliding under the heavy covers where your family is still huddled together. The darkness outside may be vast and cold, but the world inside the longhouse is integrated and alive. You close your eyes, and the last thing you hear before falling back into a deep sleep is the low, muffled thud of a hoof against the earth. It is a steady, rhythmic sound, like the ticking of a great, warm clock, marking the hours until the sun finally rises over the frozen fields. You are not alone in the winter. You are part of a huddle that spans across species, a shared pact of warmth against the coming of the ice. The longhouse holds you all, human and beast alike, in a single steaming breath of survival. You stand in the center of the room, and the air around you feels like a physical weight. It is not merely cold. It is a living thing that searches for any patch of bare skin, any gap in your defenses. The fire in the hearth has settled into a low, pulsing crimson, throwing long, dancing shadows against the timber walls. You know that as soon as you step away from that circle of warmth, the winter will claim the heat from your body. To survive a medieval night, you cannot rely on the fire alone. You must transform yourself into a fortress. You must understand the science of the layer. You begin with the layer closest to your soul. You reach for your chemise or your smock. This is made of linen, a fabric birthed from the flax plant. As you pull it over your head, the fabric feels cool, almost shocking against your skin. You might wonder why you would choose a cool fabric for a freezing night, but there is a vital logic to this. Linen is your primary moisture manager. Even in the depths of winter, your body breathes and sometimes sweats under the heavy weight of blankets. If that moisture stays on your skin, it will eventually turn cold, and once you are damp, you are lost. The linen pulls that moisture away, keeping your skin dry and your core temperature stable. It is soft, or at least it becomes soft after years of washing and wear, and it acts as a barrier between you and the coarser fabrics to come. Now, you reach for the true miracle of the medieval world. You pick up your heavy woolen kirtle or tunic. As you shake it out, a faint smell of the countryside fills the air. It is the scent of lanolin, the natural grease of the sheep, and the lingering ghost of wood smoke that has permeated every fiber of the house. You feel the weight of it. This is not the thin, refined wool of a modern suit. This is thick, dense, and scratchy. But as you pull it on over your linen, you feel an immediate shift. The science of wool is a wonder of nature that the medieval mind understood through experience rather than equations. If you were to look at these fibers through a glass, you would see that they are not smooth. They are covered in tiny, microscopic scales, and the fibers themselves are crimped and wavy. When these fibers are spun together, they create millions of tiny, microscopic pockets. These pockets are the key to your survival. They trap air. Air is one of the best insulators in the natural world, provided it is kept still. Your body, a constant furnace of 98 degrees, heats the air directly against your skin. Without clothing, that warm air would rise and be replaced by the biting cold of the room. But the wool captures that warm air and holds it prisoner. You are now walking inside a personal envelope of your own body heat. This is the concept of dead airspace. The more layers of wool you add, the more pockets of warm air you create. It is a slow, steady accumulation of warmth that no single thick garment could ever match. You sit on the edge of your bed to attend to your legs. You do not wear trousers in the way a modern person might. Instead, you have individual leggings made of woven wool. You pull them up and tie them to your linen brace or your belt. To an observer, they look simple, but the weave is clever. It is often a bias cut, meaning the fabric is cut diagonally across the grain, giving it a natural stretch that hugs your muscles. This close fit is not just for fashion. By keeping the wool tight against your skin, you eliminate large pockets where cold air could circulate. You are sealing the envelope. If the night is truly bitter, you take long strips of woolen cloth, called waningas or leg wraps. You begin at your ankle and wrap them tightly around your calves, overlapping the fabric as you go up toward the knee. With every turn of the cloth, you are adding another layer of trapped air, another barrier against the draft that snakes across the floor. By the time you are finished, your legs feel heavy, almost like the trunks of trees, but they are glowing with a heat that the outside world cannot touch. You cannot forget your head. You reach for a coif, a simple linen cap that ties under your chin. It looks humble, perhaps even a bit ridiculous to a modern eye, but it is your most essential piece of sleepwear. You know instinctively what science eventually proved, that a massive amount of your body heat can be lost through the scalp. The blood vessels in your head are close to the surface and do not constrict in the cold as much as those in your hands or feet. Without a covering, your head acts like a chimney, venting your precious warmth into the rafters. You tie the linen coif to keep your hair clean and provide the first layer, and then you pull a woolen hood over it. The hood drapes over your shoulders, sealing the gap at the neck of your tunic. You are now fully encased. Before you climb into the bedding, you look at the cloak draped over the chest at the foot of your bed. This is your outer shell. It is made of wool that has been fulled. This means the fabric was soaked in water and beaten for hours, causing the fibers to lock together and shrink into a dense, felt-like mat. It is nearly waterproof and almost entirely windproof. You will use this as your final top layer. It is the shield that protects the delicate pockets of air in your inner layers from being stripped away by the movement of air in the room. You climb into the bed now, and you feel the final piece of the layering puzzle. You are not lying on a flat, cold mattress. You are sinking into a sack filled with straw or, if you are fortunate, the down feathers of geese. This is the bottom layer of your insulation. The floor of a medieval house is a reservoir of cold, whether it is made of packed earth or stone. The thick mattress is your barrier against the heat being sucked out of you from below through conduction. As you pull the heavy wool blankets over you, you feel the physical pressure. There is a psychological comfort in this weight, a feeling of being anchored and safe. But the weight serves a thermal purpose too. It presses the layers of your clothing together, eliminating any large gaps while still allowing the microscopic air pockets to do their work. If you are wealthy, these blankets might be lined with fur. Fur is the ultimate layering technology of the Middle Ages. Each hair on a pelt is a hollow tube, and the dense undercoat of a squirrel or a rabbit traps air with an efficiency that even the finest wool cannot match. The fur feels soft against your face, a luxury that stands in stark contrast to the howling wind outside. You lie there, and you can feel the system working. It takes a few minutes for your body to prime the pump, to heat up those millions of tiny air pockets. But soon, the shivering stops. You are a living core of warmth wrapped in linen, encased in wool, shrouded in felt, and buried under blankets. The science of layering has created a microclimate. Outside your cocoon, the water in the wash basin is beginning to skim over with ice. The breath of the cattle in the next room hangs in the air like fog. But inside your layers, you are as warm as a summer afternoon in the fields. You realize that this is not just about staying warm, it is about the economy of energy. In a world where food is fuel and the winter is long, your body cannot afford to waste its heat. Every layer you wear is a way of saving your own life, one trapped air bubble at a time. You close your eyes, the weight of the wool pressing you into the straw, and you listen to the wood in the walls groan as it freezes. You are ready for the deep night. You are wrapped in the wisdom of centuries, a masterpiece of biological and textile engineering. You are drifting now. The world outside your small, timber-framed home has vanished into a void of absolute ink. There are no streetlights, no glowing windows from a neighbor down the lane, and no soft hum of electricity to ground you in the present. There is only the wind, the heavy scent of wood smoke, and the rhythmic breathing of the people lying beside you. This is the first sleep. In the medieval mind, this initial period of rest is known as the dead sleep. It is the heavy, dreamless slumber that claims you immediately after the sun has vanished and the chores of the day are finally surrendered to the dark. Because you have spent your daylight hours in grueling physical labor, pulling at the frozen earth or hauling wood through the snow, your body collapses into this first sleep with a desperation that is hard to imagine in a world of sedentary office work. You feel your muscles slacken. The coarse wool of your tunic and the heavy blankets above you seem to press you down into the straw. This is not just rest. It is a biological necessity. In these long winter months, the night can stretch for 14 or 16 hours. Your body cannot possibly sleep through all of that time in one single stretch. Instead, you are following a pattern that has governed human existence for thousands of years, a rhythm that we in the modern world have almost entirely forgotten. You are practicing biphasic sleep. For about 4 hours, you are gone. You are dead to the world. The fire in the hearth begins to settle, the bright orange flames dying down into a deep, pulsating red glow. The temperature in the room begins to drop. The heat that was trapped in the stones of the chimney starts to dissipate into the rafters. But you do not feel it yet. You are wrapped in the deepest layers of your first sleep. During this time, your brain is doing the heavy lifting of restoration. Historians and scientists tell us that during this first block of rest, the medieval person experienced a profound level of physical recovery. Without the distraction of artificial blue light or the stress of a clock ticking on the bedside table, your endocrine system is flooding your body with prolactin, a hormone that creates a sense of peace and stillness. But then, something happens. It is usually around midnight or 1 in the morning. You do not wake up because of an alarm or a sudden noise. You wake up because your body has finished its first act. You find yourself suddenly, quietly, and completely awake. You open your eyes to the darkness of the room. This is the watch. It is the bridge between your first sleep and your second sleep. In the Middle Ages, this hour of wakefulness is not a time of frustration. You do not toss and turn or worry about your inability to stay asleep. You do not look at a clock and calculate how many hours you have left before you must rise. Instead, You accept this period of wakefulness as one of the most productive and spiritual times of your entire day. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the person sleeping next to you. The air in the room is much colder now than it was when you first lay down. You can see your breath blooming in the faint light of the dying embers like a ghost. You reach out a hand and feel for the heavy cloak you left at the foot of the bed, pulling it over your shoulders. You are in a state of quiet wakefulness. Because of the high levels of prolactin still in your system, you feel calm, meditative, and strangely clear-headed. This is the time of the night when the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual world feels thinnest. In the silence of the cottage, you might hear the soft rustle of livestock in the partitioned area of the house. The warmth of the cows and sheep provides a living heater for the building, and their presence is a comfort. You listen to the slow, heavy thud of a cow shifting its weight. To you, this is the sound of survival. If the animals are quiet and warm, then your family will have milk and wool in the spring. You might use this hour to perform the most important task of the winter night, which is tending the fire. You slide out of the warmth of the bed, your feet meeting the cold, packed earth floor. You move quickly to the hearth. You take a small iron poker and stir the gray ash, looking for the glowing heart of the fire. You add a few small logs or a handful of peat, blowing gently until a small flame licks upward. You are not trying to build a roaring blaze, just ensuring that the coals will survive until morning. As the flame catches, you look around the room. In this state of midnight wakefulness, your mind is remarkably active. This is when the medieval person did their best thinking. If you were a scholar or a monk, you would use this time to study by the light of a single tallow candle. But even as a peasant, this is your time for reflection. You might recite your prayers, the familiar Latin words, or the simple pleas for protection against the winter. You pray for the health of your children, for the safety of the village, and for the return of the sun. There is a profound sense of intimacy in these prayers. In the total darkness of a medieval winter, God feels very close, as if He is sitting right there in the shadows with you. This is also a social hour. You might find that your spouse or your brother has also woken up. You speak in low, hushed tones so as not to wake the children. You talk about the things that are too busy to discuss during the frantic work of the day. You talk about your hopes for the coming harvest, or perhaps you share a story about your own parents. This is often the time when the most important family decisions are made or when the bonds of a marriage are reinforced. There is no pressure. The world outside is frozen and still. There is nowhere to go and nothing to do but exist in this small pocket of warmth and conversation. In some villages, people even use this time to visit one another. You might see a faint light bobbing through the snow outside as a neighbor walks from one cottage to another to borrow a coal or simply to share a moment of human contact. It is a time of strange, nighttime vitality. In many medieval medical texts, doctors actually recommended that this period between the two sleeps was the best time for conception. The body was rested from the first sleep but not yet sluggish from the second. It was a time of physical and emotional connection that was protected by the absolute privacy of the winter night. As you sit by the small fire, you feel a sense of profound solitude that is impossible to find in the 21st century. You are not reachable by anyone. There are no messages, no news from distant lands, and no demands on your attention. You are simply a human being in the middle of a dark winter, waiting for the cycle of the earth to turn. You might spend this hour simply watching the shadows dance on the rafters. You notice the way the light catches the dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, the bundles of lavender and rosemary that provide a faint, sweet scent to mask the smell of the smoke. You feel the ancient rhythm of the world pulsing in your own blood. Eventually, the clarity of the watch begins to fade. The prolactin levels begin to dip, and a different kind of tiredness begins to wash over you. This is the signal that it is time for the second sleep. This second period of rest will be different from the first. It will be lighter, filled with dreams that are often vivid and strange. The medieval world believed that these early morning dreams were messages from the soul or even premonitions of the future. You bank the fire one last time, ensuring the embers are buried safely under a layer of ash to preserve them. You climb back into the bed, feeling the lingering warmth left by the bodies of your family. As you pull the blankets back up to your chin, you feel a deep sense of security. You have navigated the most dangerous part of the night. You have checked the fire, you have said your prayers, and you have connected with the people you love. The transition from the first sleep to the second sleep is like crossing a bridge over a dark river. You have reached the other side. The temperature outside might be dropping to its lowest point as the dawn approaches. But you are tucked away, insulated by wool, straw, and the collective heat of your household. You close your eyes, and the world begins to soften. The sounds of the wind and the livestock fade into the background. You are ready for the dreams of the second sleep, those drifting, ethereal visions that will carry you through the final hours of the long winter night until the first gray light of morning begins to touch the shutters. You are a part of a cycle as old as time itself, a rhythm of rest and wakefulness that honors the darkness rather than trying to banish it. You sink back down, letting the second sleep take you. You are awake again, but this time it is not the gentle pull of the second sleep that finds you. Instead, it is the sharp, biting reality of the air. The heavy blankets and the warmth of the bodies beside you are no longer enough to mask the fact that the temperature in the room has plummeted. The deep, heavy silence of a medieval winter night is broken only by the whistling of the wind through the thatch and the rhythmic breathing of your family. But there is another sound, or rather a lack of sound, that has pulled you from your slumber. The crackle of the hearth has died down to a faint, rhythmic hiss. The dancing orange light that previously painted the walls has faded into a dull, pulsing crimson glow. This is the midnight watch. In the Middle Ages, the fire was not merely a comfort or a luxury. It was the very heart of the home, a living thing that required constant feeding and attention. To let the fire go out in the dead of winter was more than an inconvenience. It was a potential death sentence. If the embers died and the hearth went cold, the damp, bone-chilling frost would claim the house by dawn. Starting a fire from scratch in the freezing dark with flint, steel, and tinder that might be slightly damp from the night air was a grueling task that no one wanted to face at 3 in the morning. You swing your legs out from under the covers, and the shock of the cold hits you like a physical blow. The floor, whether it is packed earth or rough timber, feels like ice against your skin. You do not stand up fully, keeping your head low to avoid the layer of smoke that always hangs just below the ceiling. You move toward the hearth, your eyes adjusting to the gloom. This is a responsibility that rotates among the members of the household, or perhaps it falls to the eldest or the one who sleeps closest to the heat. Tonight, the duty is yours. As you approach the center of the room, you see the mound of gray ash. Beneath that ash lies the lifeblood of your survival. You take a long iron poker or a sturdy branch and gently stir the heap. A shower of sparks erupts, dancing briefly in the air before vanishing. There they are, the glowing red eyes of the embers. They are smaller than they were when you went to bed, but they are still fierce. You reach for the woodpile stacked near the door. In a medieval household, the management of fuel was an art form. You have to be careful, You cannot simply throw your best, driest oak logs onto the fire in the middle of the night. Those are precious, saved for the heavy cooking of the midday meal or the coldest evenings when guests are present. For the midnight watch, you use the slower burning fuels. Perhaps you have a few thick chunks of elm, which burns slowly and holds its heat, or maybe some dense peat bricks if you live in the marshlands or the north. You carefully place the new fuel onto the embers. You do not want to smother them. You blow gently, a steady stream of air to encourage the flames. The smoke rises, thick and pungent, stinging your eyes and filling your lungs. In this era, there are no sophisticated chimneys in most common homes. There is a hole in the roof, a smoke vent, but much of the exhaust lingers. You have grown used to the smell of wood smoke. It is the scent of home, of safety, and of heat. To a person of the Middle Ages, a house that does not smell of smoke is a house that is unnervingly cold. As the flames begin to lick around the new wood, you crouch there for a moment, basking in the immediate radiance. This is a lonely, private time. The world outside is frozen, locked in a crystalline grip of ice and snow. Out there, in the darkness beyond your walls, the wolves might be howling or the wind might be stripping the last dead leaves from the trees. But here, by the glow of the hearth, you have carved out a tiny sanctuary of light. You think about the concept of the curfew. The word itself comes from the French phrase couvre-feu, which literally means cover fire. In many towns and villages, a bell rings at dusk to signal that all fires must be covered or extinguished to prevent the catastrophic fires that could level a wooden city in hours. But covering the fire does not mean putting it out. It means using a ceramic or metal cover, shaped like a bell, to shield the embers. This keeps them hot and prevents sparks from flying onto the straw rushes on the floor while the family sleeps. You lift the cover now if your family is wealthy enough to own one, or you simply move the heavy stones that serve a similar purpose. Maintaining the fire is a physical labor that links you to the seasons. Every branch you place on the hearth today was gathered months ago. You remember the back-breaking work of late summer and autumn, foraging for fallen limbs in the local woods, provided your Lord granted you the right of firewood. You remember the hauling, the chopping, and the stacking. Every log represents hours of sweat. To burn it is to consume your own past labor to ensure your future survival. As the fire catches hold, the room begins to change. The shadows retreat to the corners. You can see the outlines of the heavy wooden chests, the loom standing silent in the corner, and the forms of your family members huddled together. The heat begins to radiate outward again, pushing back the creeping frost that had begun to form on the inside of the shuttered windows. There is a psychological weight to this moment as well. In the medieval mind, the night was a place of danger, inhabited by spirits, demons, and the restless dead. The fire was a ward, a magical and physical barrier against the terrors of the dark. As long as the flame burned, the household was protected. You watch the way the light plays across the ceiling, creating strange, shifting shapes in the thatch. You might mutter a quick prayer, a plea for protection until the sun rises. The fire is your companion in these quiet hours. You take a moment to check the water bucket near the hearth. It is essential to have water nearby in case a stray spark catches the bedding or the floor. Fire is a fickle friend, keeps you alive, but it can also destroy everything you own in a matter of minutes. You see the thin skin of ice that has already formed on the surface of the water in the bucket, a testament to how cold the room has become away from the direct heat of the flames. You crack the ice with your knuckles, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. The fire is now stable, The new logs are blackening, their edges glowing white-hot as they succumb to the heat. The hiss of moisture escaping the wood is a comforting, domestic melody. You know that this will last for another few hours, long enough to see the family through to the first light of dawn when the work of the day begins in earnest. Your task is done. The midnight watch is over. You feel the exhaustion returning, pulling at your limbs. The initial shock of the cold has passed, replaced by a lingering chill that only the blankets can cure. You move back toward the bed, stepping carefully over the sleeping forms of your kin. You slide back under the heavy layers of wool and hide, feeling the residual warmth that your body left behind. As you settle in, you feel the shift in the room's atmosphere. The air is slightly warmer now, the biting edge taken off by your efforts. The steady, low roar of the revitalized fire is a lullaby. You have fulfilled your role in the ancient dance of survival. You have kept the darkness at bay. You close your eyes, the image of the dancing orange flames still burned into your retinas, and you let yourself drift back into the depths of the second sleep, knowing that the heart of the home is beating once again. The winter night continues outside, but inside, the fire of survival remains unquenched. You turn away from the dying embers of the hearth, feeling the immediate bite of the draft against your back. In the flickering gloom of your medieval home, your eyes settle on the one place where you hope to find a few hours of respite from the brutal winter chill. But this is not the plush, supportive mattress of the 21st century. There are no memory foam layers here, no cooling gels, and certainly no clean, machine-washed cotton waiting to embrace you. Instead, you approach a bulky, misshapen sack resting on a wooden frame or perhaps simply on a raised earthen platform. This is your bed, and tonight, like every night in the Middle Ages, your sleep will be a complex negotiation between the need for warmth and the reality of the materials beneath you. As you lower your weight onto the surface, the first thing you hear is a loud, dry crunching sound. It is a sound that defines the sleeping experience for almost every person in Europe, from the lowly peasant to the moderately successful merchant. You are lying on a straw mattress or what is often called a palliasse. This is essentially a giant ticking bag made of coarse, hand-woven linen or hemp, stuffed to bursting with the leftovers of the summer harvest. Depending on your region and your status, it might be filled with rye straw, wheat stalks, or perhaps dried ferns and heather. You feel the sharp, stiff ends of the straw poking through the weave of the fabric. It is lumpy and uneven. Every time you shift your body to find a more comfortable position, the mattress groans and rustles beneath you, announcing your every movement to anyone else sleeping in the room. In the winter, the straw provides a vital layer of insulation between your body and the freezing ground, but it is far from a passive object. It is a living, changing thing. Over weeks and months of use, the straw breaks down under your weight. It turns from long, springy stalks into fine, dusty chaff. It settles into the corners of the bag, leaving you lying on a thin, hard layer in the center where the wooden slats of the bed frame begin to dig into your hips and shoulders. If you are lucky, you might have replenished the straw before the first frost. Fresh straw smells of the fields, a sweet, earthy scent that reminds you of the sun. But as winter drags on, that scent fades, replaced by the smell of wood smoke, stale sweat, and dampness. Because the air in your home is humid from the cooking pot and the breath of huddled bodies, the straw inside your mattress begins to absorb moisture. It becomes heavy and slightly musty. If it gets too damp, it can begin to rot or sprout mold, adding a subterranean, earthy funk to the air you breathe throughout the night. But the texture and the smell are only the beginning of your sensory experience. As your body heat begins to warm the mattress, you realize that you are not alone in this bed. In the Middle Ages, the bed is a dense ecosystem. You are currently sharing your sleeping space with a host of uninvited guests who have been waiting all day for the return of a warm body. First, there are the fleas. They hide in the cracks of the floorboards and the deep recesses of the straw. They are incredibly resilient, able to survive the freezing temperatures by lying dormant until they feel the vibration of your footsteps and the radiant heat of your skin. As you settle under your heavy wool blankets, the fleas wake up. You feel a tiny, sharp prick on your ankle, then another on your thigh. It is an itch that you cannot truly scratch away because to reach it, you would have to throw off your covers and expose yourself to the sub-zero air of the room. Then there are the bedbugs. These are the true masters of the medieval bedroom. They do not live in the straw as much as they live in the bed frame itself or in the seams of your linen sack. They are flat, reddish-brown parasites that have been a plague upon humanity since we first lived in caves. In the winter, they are less active than in the summer, but your body heat acts like a dinner bell. They crawl out from the shadows, guided by the carbon dioxide you exhale. Unlike the quick jump of a flea, the bedbug is a slow, methodical traveler. You might feel a tickle on your arm, a soft sensation of something moving across your skin. If you were to light a candle, you might see them scuttling away from the flame, but in the pitch black of a winter night, you can only feel them. The bites of these vermin are more than just an annoyance. They are a constant drain on your energy and your health. In a world where you are already pushed to the limit by the cold and a restricted winter diet, the blood loss from a heavy infestation can lead to anemia and exhaustion. Furthermore, the scratching leads to open sores, which, in an age before antibiotics, can easily become infected. You spend your nights in a restless cycle of drifting into a light sleep and being jerked awake by a fresh itch or the sensation of something crawling behind your ear. To combat these pests, you use whatever tools are at your disposal. You might have stuffed certain herbs into the mattress along with the straw. Wormwood is a favorite, known for its bitter scent that is said to repel insects. You might use dried lavender or mint to mask the smell of the damp straw and discourage the lice. Some people use bean leaves spread under the bed, as the microscopic hooks on the leaves can trap bedbugs like natural flypaper. But in the depths of winter, these herbal defenses are often dried out and losing their potency. You also have to contend with the body lice. Unlike fleas and bedbugs, which live in the environment, body lice live in your clothing. Because it is so cold, you have not changed your heavy wool tunic or your undergarments in weeks. To do so would mean stripping naked in a room where the water in the wash basin has frozen solid. So the lice remain in the seams of your clothes, right against your skin. They stay warm because you stay warm. During the day, you can ignore them as you work, but in the silence of the night, when you are trying to remain still, their constant movement becomes maddening. Despite the vermin and the scratchy straw, you cling to this bed because it is your only sanctuary. You are likely huddling with other people. If you are a parent, your children are tucked in beside you, their small bodies providing much-needed warmth. If you are a servant, you might be sharing a single large straw pallet with 3 or 4 other workers. This communal sleeping is a practical necessity. The shared body heat creates a pocket of warmth within the blankets that can reach a comfortable temperature, even if the rest of the room is at the freezing point. The blankets themselves are heavy, coarse wool, woven on a loom in your own village or perhaps traded for at a local fair. They are not soft. They are scratchy and oily, retaining the natural lanolin from the sheep, which helps to shed moisture and trap heat. You pull these blankets up over your head, creating a small, stale cavern of air. The weight of the wool presses the straw down, making it feel slightly more solid, less like a pile of debris and more like a foundation. In your mind, you try to ignore the rustle of the straw and the scurrying sounds you hear in the thatch of the roof above you. Mice and rats also seek the warmth of the home in winter, and they find the straw mattresses to be excellent nesting material. Occasionally, you might feel a heavier weight shift at the foot of the bed as a rodent scurries across the blankets, looking for a stray crumb or a bit of warmth. You kick your feet to scare it away, the straw crunching loudly in response. This is the reality of the medieval night. It is not a silent, peaceful slumber in a sterilized environment. It is a noisy, itchy, and crowded experience. You learn to sleep in snatches. You learn to tolerate the bites and the prickles of the rye stalks. You find a strange comfort in the very things that would horrify a modern person. The smell of the damp straw means you have a bed. The weight of the scratchy wool means you will not freeze. The presence of your family members pressing against you means you are not alone in the dark. As the hours pass, the straw continues to compress. The initial loft of the mattress vanishes, and you feel the hard floor or the wooden frame more clearly. You roll onto your side, trying to fluff the straw beneath your hip without letting the precious warm air escape from under the blankets. Every movement is a risk. A sudden turn can open a gap in the covers, allowing a stream of icy air to pour in, undoing an hour of collective body heating. You lie there, staring into the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside and the rhythmic breathing of your companions. You are suspended between two worlds. Above you is the biting, unforgiving cold of the medieval winter. Beneath you is the rustling, living world of the straw mattress, filled with dust, herbs, and the tiny, persistent creatures of the night. You close your eyes, pulling the wool tighter, and wait for the thin light of dawn to signal that you have survived another night between the sheets. You do not wake to the ringing of an alarm or the gentle chime of a phone. You do not wake because the sun has crested the horizon or because the birds have begun their morning chorus. In fact, it is still the deepest part of the night. Outside the thick stone walls of your cottage or the timber frames of your townhouse, the world is a frozen void. The wind might be howling through the eaves, or perhaps there is that eerie, heavy silence that only comes with a thick blanket of fresh snow. But inside, beneath your heavy wool blankets and the furs you have piled on for survival, your eyes snap open. You are not startled. You are not worried that you have woken up too early. This is not the frustrating insomnia of the modern world where you toss and turn, calculating how many hours of rest you have left before your commute. This is something different. This is the watch. This is the interval. In the Middle Ages, this gap in the night is as natural as breathing. You have just finished your first sleep, and now, in the dead of winter, you have entered the most mysterious and quietest part of the human experience. As you lie there, the air in the room is so cold that your breath forms a visible mist in the faint, dying glow of the hearth. The fire has burned down to a pile of pulsing orange embers, buried deep in a bed of gray ash to preserve the heat. You feel the weight of the person sleeping next to you, perhaps a spouse, a sibling, or a child. In the winter, you are never truly alone in bed because body heat is the only thing keeping the frost from your bones. But in this moment of wakefulness, even with others pressed against you, there is a profound sense of solitude. This is the time known in old texts as the dorval or the wakeful sleep. It is a biological rhythm that we in the modern world have almost entirely forgotten, buried under the invention of the light bulb and the rigid schedules of the industrial age. But for you, a person of the medieval world, this hour or two of midnight consciousness is a gift. It is a pocket of time where the demands of the Lord, the toil of the field, and the frantic light of day cannot reach you. You sit up slowly, mindful of the cold biting at your shoulders. You reach out to the bedside where a small tallow candle or a rushlight sits. You might strike a spark to light it, or you might simply rely on the dim, rhythmic pulse of the embers across the room. The house is full of sounds that you do not notice during the day. You hear the shifting of the straw in the mattress, the heavy breathing of your family, and the occasional rustle of livestock if they are sheltered in the far end of the house. In the winter, the animals are your furnace, and their presence provides a strange comfort in the dark. What do you do with this time? For most, the first instinct is spiritual. In a world where the supernatural is as real as the dirt beneath your fingernails, the middle of the night is when the veil between heaven and earth is at its thinnest. You begin to pray. You do not necessarily need a book of hours or the ability to read. You recite the prayers you have known since childhood, the Pater Noster or the Ave Maria, whispering the words into the freezing air. There is a specific quality to prayer at this hour. It is not the rushed public prayer of the Sunday Mass. It is intimate. It is a conversation held in the dark with a God who you believe is watching over your soul while the world sleeps. For the monks and nuns in the nearby monastery, this time is even more structured. They have risen from their hard pallets at the sound of a bell, shuffling through freezing stone corridors to the chapel for matins and lauds. You might hear the distant, muffled tolling of that bell across the snowy fields. It serves as a heartbeat for the community, a reminder that even in the deepest freeze, the work of praising the Creator never stops. You join them in spirit from your own bed, your mind wandering through your sins, your hopes for the spring, and your gratitude for surviving the day that has just passed. But the second sleep interval is not just for the soul. It is also a time for the body and the home. You might find the courage to slide out from under the furs, your feet hitting the cold earthen floor with a shock that makes your skin crawl. You move quickly to the hearth. This is a crucial moment. If the fire dies completely, you will face a brutal struggle in the morning to relight it. You use a small iron poker to stir the embers, feeding them a few precious scraps of wood or a bit of dried peat. You watch the sparks dance upward, a tiny constellation of orange against the black soot of the chimney. This act of tending the fire is a ritual of survival. In these quiet hours, many people find their minds are remarkably clear. Medical tracts of the time suggest that this is the best time for serious thought and reflection. Without the distractions of chores and the clamor of the village, your brain enters a state of calm alertness. If you are a person of some education, perhaps a clerk or a merchant, you might use this time to go over accounts in your head or compose a letter you will write tomorrow. If you are a craftsperson, you might sit by the dim light and perform small tasks that do not require much movement, like mending a tear in a tunic or sharpening a tool by feel. There is also a social element to the second sleep that we often overlook. If your family members have woken up as well, this is a time for low, hushed conversation. In the darkness, away from the prying eyes of neighbors or the pressures of the day, people share secrets, tell stories, or discuss family matters. It is a time for intimacy. Doctors in the Middle Ages often noted that the period between the first and second sleep was the most common time for a husband and wife to conceive, believing that the body was more rested and the spirit more composed after the initial few hours of slumber. However, the winter adds a layer of hardship to this midnight watch. In the summer, you might have stepped outside to look at the stars or breathe the night air. In December or January, the door stays barred. The cold is a physical presence, a predator waiting at the threshold. You stay close to the bed, close to the fire, wrapped in whatever wool you can find. You might take a drink of small beer or cider that has been sitting near the hearth to take the chill off, the fermented liquid providing a tiny bloom of warmth in your chest. You might also find yourself thinking about the dangers of the night. The medieval mind is populated with more than just physical threats like wolves or thieves. The dark is the domain of demons, of wandering spirits, and of the wild hunt. You cross yourself when a sudden gust of wind rattles the shutters, wondering if it is just the air or something more malevolent passing by. The prayers you say are not just for devotion, but for protection. You are carving out a small circle of light and safety in a vast, cold wilderness. As the hour passes, a subtle change begins to happen. The initial burst of clarity starts to soften. The cold, which seemed so sharp when you first woke, begins to induce a heavy, dragging tiredness. Your limbs feel weighted, and the rhythmic breathing of your companions pulls at your own consciousness like a tide. This is the signal that the interval is closing. The watch is over, and your body is ready for the second sleep. This second part of your rest is often described as being deeper and more restorative than the first. You climb back into the nest of blankets, the heat of the other bodies welcoming you back. As you settle in, the anxieties of the night fade. You have tended the fire, you have spoken to your God, you have checked on your children, and you have confirmed that you are still alive and warm. You close your eyes once more, drifting into a slumber that will carry you until the first gray smudge of light appears in the east. This biphasic rhythm, this breaking of the night into two distinct halves, is the secret to how you endure the long, oppressive winters. You do not fight the darkness. You inhabit it. You move with the natural cycles of your body, finding productivity and peace in the very hours that modern humans have come to fear or ignore. As the second sleep takes hold, the freezing world outside ceases to exist, and you slide into a dreamless rest, bolstered by the knowledge that you have successfully navigated the deepest part of the winter night. Imagine yourself standing at the base of a spiral staircase, carved from the very heart of a limestone cliff. You are a person of significant means, perhaps a lord or a lady of a high house, and the year is 1250. The sun has long since dipped below the jagged horizon, and the great hall below you is falling silent. The massive logs in the central hearth have crumbled into glowing red jewels, casting long, dancing shadows against the tapestries. You begin your ascent. Each step you take upward is a step further into the teeth of the winter. In a castle, heat does not rise the way you might expect. Instead, the cold seems to sink, heavy and oppressive, down the stone shafts and through the arrow loops. Your leather boots click against the stone, and you can feel the chill vibrating through the soles. The air in this stairwell is so cold that your breath does not just puff into a cloud. It seems to hang there, a ghost of your presence in the dark. You reach the door to your private chamber, the solar. In the hierarchy of medieval architecture, this is the height of luxury. It is a room with a window, perhaps even one with small, precious panes of thick, green-tinged glass rather than just a wooden shutter. But luxury in the Middle Ages does not mean a consistent temperature. As you push open the heavy oak door, the draft from the corridor chases you inside, flickering the single tallow candle you carry in your hand. You are now in a room that is essentially a box of frozen stone. The walls are 3 feet thick, yet they offer no warmth. Stone is a heat sink. It drinks the warmth of the day and radiates a deep, penetrating cold throughout the night. To live here in January is to live inside a mountain of ice. But you are not a peasant on a straw pallet. You have a defense against this environment, an architectural marvel of the domestic world that serves as your sanctuary. You turn your gaze toward the center of the room. There, looming like a fortress within a fortress, is your bed. This is not merely a piece of furniture. It is a four-poster structure, a massive frame of dark, carved oak that sits high off the floor. It is your private world, your warm kingdom. Before you approach the bed, your personal servant, a valet or a lady in waiting, is already moving through the final preparations for your rest. You watch as they take a long-handled brass vessel, a warming pan filled with hot coals snatched from the hearth downstairs. They slide this pan between the layers of your bedding, moving it back and forth with a rhythmic, grating sound. They are chasing the frost out of the linen. The smell of slightly toasted flax and wood smoke begins to rise, a scent that, to you, represents the ultimate comfort. You begin the process of undressing. In the modern world, we think of stripping down for bed, but in a medieval castle in winter, you dress for sleep. You remove your heavy wool surcoat, but you do not stand naked. You wear a long, loose linen chemise or shirt. Over this, you might pull on a waistcoat of quilted silk or soft wool. On your head, you place a coif, a close-fitting linen cap that ties under the chin. This is essential. The medieval mind believes, quite rightly, that the heat escapes through the head, and in a room where the water in your wash basin has already begun to glaze over with ice, protecting the crown of your head is a matter of survival. You step up onto a small wooden stool to reach the height of the mattress. As you climb in, you sink. You do not land on a firm, modern mattress. You sink into a foot of goose down and feathers. Beneath that is a thick pallet of straw for stability, and perhaps a layer of dried lavender and hay to keep the bed smelling sweet despite the closed windows. The weight of the covers is immediate and immense. First, there are the linen sheets, crisp and now warmed by the brass pan. Then come the heavy wool blankets, woven so tightly they are almost waterproof. Finally, the crowning glory of the noble bed is pulled over you, the furs. You pull up a coverlet made of marten, fox, or even the heavy, dense pelt of a bear. The weight of these furs presses you down into the feathers, pinning you in a cocoon of animal warmth. But the most important part of your winter defense is yet to come. You reach out and pull the heavy velvet curtains that surround the four posts of the bed. As the fabric slides along the iron rods, the rest of the room disappears. You are no longer in a drafty, cavernous stone chamber. You are in a small, soft, fabric box. This is the secret of the nobleman's winter retreat. By closing these thick, often double-lined curtains, you have created a microclimate. The heat from your own body, and perhaps the body of your spouse or the small hunting dog curled at your feet, is trapped within this small volume of space. Within 20 minutes, the air inside the bed curtains will be 20 or even 30 degrees warmer than the air in the rest of the room. You are breathing air that you have warmed with your own lungs. Listen to the sounds of the night. Outside the velvet curtains, the wind howls through the battlements. You can hear the occasional crack of the stone walls as the moisture inside them freezes and expands. You might hear the distant scurrying of a mouse across the rushes on the floor or the heavy tread of a guard on the wall walk outside. But inside the curtains, it is muffled and still. The fabric acts as an acoustic barrier as much as a thermal one. You lie there, staring up at the wooden canopy above you, the tester. It is often carved with protective symbols or religious scenes, meant to guard your soul while you sleep. The darkness here is absolute. There is no glow from a street lamp, no light from a hallway. It is a deep, velvet blackness that feels as thick as the blankets. In this cocoon, you are safe from the corrupt airs, that medieval doctors warn about. They believe that the cold, damp night air carries miasma or disease. By sleeping behind curtains, you are filtering the world. You are creating a sanctuary of purity. But even for a nobleman, the night is not without its chores. If the fire in the small hearth across the room dies out, the temperature in the solar will drop below freezing. You might have a servant who sleeps on a trundle bed, a low frame on wheels that slides out from under your great bed. This person stays in the room specifically to tend the fire and to provide an extra layer of security. Their presence is a reminder that even in sleep, you are a person of power, surrounded by people whose lives are dedicated to your comfort. As the middle of the night approaches, you feel the profound silence of the castle. The stone walls, so cold and forbidding, are also your protectors. They stand between you and the marauding bands of wolves that howl in the forest beyond the gate, or the bitter frost that is currently killing the winter wheat in the fields. You are encased in layers of protection, stone, then wood, then velvet, then fur, then wool, then linen. You think of the peasants you saw earlier huddled in their smoky huts. You know they are warm in their own way, buried in straw and huddled with their livestock. But your warmth is different. It is the warmth of silk and status. It is the luxury of being able to ignore the winter, to retreat so deeply into a nest of fabric that the season itself becomes nothing more than a faint sound against the windowpane. Your breathing slows. The air inside your curtained sanctuary is sweet and heavy. You are a king or a queen of this tiny, warm territory. The rest of the world can freeze. The rivers can turn to solid glass, and the birds can fall frozen from the trees. But here, between the curtains of silk and stone, the winter cannot reach you. You surrender to the weight of the firs, falling into a sleep that is deep, dark, and utterly protected from the world outside. The night deepens, and the frost patterns grow like silver ferns across the glass of your window. But you do not see them. You are encased in your private winter retreat, waiting for the sun to eventually climb over the stone battlements and begin the long process of warming the world once more. Until then, you remain in your cocoon, a silent witness to the power of the cold and the ingenuity of the human spirit to find warmth in the heart of a frozen fortress. Imagine waking up in the middle of a January night. You are tucked deep beneath your furs and heavy woolen blankets. For a few blissful moments, you feel safe and shielded. But then you shift your weight, and your nose peeks out from beneath the covers. The air that hits it is sharp and jagged, like a physical blow to the face. It is not just the temperature that shocks you. It is the weight of the air. Feels heavy, thick, and oppressive. This is the damp, the silent and invisible companion of every medieval winter. While the cold is a formidable foe, the damp is far more insidious. It does not just sit on your skin. It crawls into your bedding, it seeps into your bones, and it makes its home in the very walls that are supposed to protect you. You sit up slowly, your breath blooming in front of you like a thick white ghost. In the dim, gray light of the early morning, you can see the state of your chamber. If you are living in a manor house or a castle, you might think your stone walls are a sign of strength. But in the dead of winter, those walls are your enemy. Stone is a natural battery for the cold. It does not hold heat. Instead, it sucks the warmth out of the room and stores the freezing temperatures of the night. You reach out a hand and touch the surface of the wall near your bed. It does not feel like dry rock. It feels like a wet sponge. In the flickering light of a single tallow candle, you see a dull shine on the stones. This is condensation, a layer of moisture that has pulled itself out of the air and settled on the cold surface. In some places, where a draft whistles through a tiny crack in the mortar, that moisture has frozen into a delicate, jagged lace of white frost. This ice is not outside on the trees. It is right here, 3 inches from where you sleep. If you were a peasant living in a cottage of wattle and daub, the situation would be different but no less wet. Your walls are made of woven wooden strips slathered in a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. While this material is surprisingly good at blocking the wind, it is essentially made of earth. It breathes. When the winter rains lash against the outside of your home, the walls absorb that water. If you do not keep a fire burning constantly in the central hearth, that moisture travels all the way through the wall. You can smell it. It is the scent of wet earth and old straw, a cloying, musty aroma that fills your lungs with every breath. The most frustrating thing about this environment is that you can never truly get dry. Think about your bedding. It is your only sanctuary from the world outside. Yet even here, the invisible enemy finds you. Over the long weeks of the winter season, the moisture in the air settles into your straw mattress and your blankets. It begins as a faint clamminess that you notice when you first climb into bed at night. The blankets do not feel crisp and fresh. They feel heavy and limp. As you lie there, your own body heat tries to warm the space, but instead, it creates a slow, cold steam. You are essentially sleeping in a swamp of your own making. The straw inside your mattress begins to break down, releasing a sour smell as it struggles with the humidity. In the worst winters, people would wake up to find the edges of their blankets actually frozen to the walls of the house. This constant dampness has a profound effect on your body. The people of the Middle Ages did not have a modern understanding of germs or respiratory viruses, but they were acutely aware of the humors. They knew that a cold, wet environment led to what they called the room. You feel it the moment you try to swing your legs out of bed. Your knees and your hips ache with a dull, throbbing intensity. This is rheumatism, a condition exacerbated by the perpetual chill. Your chest feels tight, and a persistent cough echoes through the house. It is a sound that everyone recognizes. The winter cough is simply a part of life, a physical manifestation of the damp that has taken up residence in your lungs. Every object in your home is under attack. You look at your clothes, which you hung on a wooden peg the night before. When you pull them on, they feel heavy and slightly greasy. Wool is a miracle fabric because it can hold a great deal of moisture and still provide some warmth, but even wool has its limits. Putting on a damp tunic in a freezing room is a test of will. You have to use your own body heat to dry your clothes as you wear them, a process that saps your energy and leaves you shivering for the first hour of the day. Even the floor beneath your feet is part of the problem. If you are in a common home, you are standing on packed earth covered in a thick layer of rushes or straw. In the summer, this acts as a soft, insulating carpet. But in the winter, it becomes a giant sponge. The ground beneath the house is frozen, and any moisture that enters through the doorway or through a leak in the thatch roof pools in the floor coverings. Underneath the fresh top layer of straw that you might scatter to keep things tidy, the older layers are often rotting. There is a reason that medieval people used aromatic herbs like meadowsweet or lavender in their floor rushes. It was not just for decoration. It was a desperate attempt to mask the smell of damp earth and decaying vegetation that rose from the floor every time you took a step. In a castle or a wealthy manor, you might have the luxury of tapestries. You see them hanging on the walls, vibrant scenes of hunts and battles. To a modern eye, they look like art. To you, they are a vital layer of defense. They are not flush against the stone. There is a small gap of air between the tapestry and the weeping wall. This creates a pocket of insulation. When the wind howls outside and tries to push its way through the masonry, you can see the tapestries ripple and swell, as if the wall itself is breathing. They catch the moisture before it can reach the center of the room, though by the end of a long winter, these beautiful hangings will be heavy with damp and may even show spots of black mold along their lower edges. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see? The battle against the damp is a daily ritual. During the few hours of daylight, every member of the household is focused on the fire. The hearth is the heart of the home, but it is also the only dryer you have. You see blankets draped over benches and clothes hanging on racks near the flames. You are constantly turning them, hoping to bake out the moisture before the sun goes down. But there is a limit to how much you can achieve. In a small cottage, there is only so much space near the fire. The priority is cooking and keeping the people warm. The beds, tucked away in corners or against walls, often remain in the shadows, slowly drinking in the frost. The struggle even extends to the simplest tasks, like washing your face. You look at the wooden basin or the ceramic jug on the stool by your bed. Last night it held clear water. This morning it is a solid block of gray ice. To get a drink or to wash, you cannot simply pour the water. You have to take a heavy knife or a stone and break through the surface. The ice shards clatter against the side of the bowl. The water underneath is so cold it makes your teeth ache just looking at it. The very idea of splashing that liquid onto your skin is enough to make your muscles seize in anticipation. Most people choose to skip the full wash, opting instead to rub their face with a piece of dry linen, if they can find one that is truly dry. This environment is why the social aspect of medieval life was so intense. You do not stay in your own space because your own space is a cold, wet tomb. You gravitate toward the heat and toward other people. You huddle not just for the warmth of another person's body, but to create a small, dry microclimate. When a family sits together closely, their combined breath and body heat can push back the damp in a tiny circle. But the moment you step away from that circle, the damp rushes back in to claim you. The invisible enemy of frost and damp defines the rhythm of your winter. It dictates where you sit, what you wear, and how you move. It turns the simple act of sleeping into a test of endurance and the act of waking up into a feat of bravery. You learn to live with a constant low-grade chill that never truly leaves you until the first warm winds of spring. Until then, you are a tenant in a house that belongs to the winter, moving through a world where every surface is cold to the touch and every breath is a reminder of the fragile line between comfort and the biting, wet reality of the world outside. You feel it first as a hollow ache in your midsection, a vacuum that the biting air seems to rush into every time you pull a breath. In the dead of a medieval winter, the cold is not just an external enemy trying to claw its way through your wool tunic. It is an internal thief that steals your energy, your focus, and your very will to move. To survive the night ahead, you cannot rely solely on the thin blankets or the dying embers of the hearth. You need to build a fire inside yourself. This is the hour of the evening meal, and for you, food is not a matter of culinary pleasure. It is a biological necessity, a form of thermal insulation that you swallow. Imagine yourself sitting on a heavy, rough-hewn wooden bench near the center of the room. Your hands are stiff, the knuckles red and swollen from a day of hauling wood or tending to the livestock in the freezing slush. You reach out toward the black iron pot that has been hanging over the fire since long before the sun went down. This pot is the heart of the home, a perpetual vessel that rarely goes empty. In the Middle Ages, this is your lifeline. The steam rising from it is thick and smells of earth, salt, and fermented grain. This is pottage, the most critical weapon in your arsenal against the frost. As you ladle a thick, steaming portion into your wooden bowl, you notice that it is not the light, fluffy porridge of a modern breakfast. It is a dense, grayish-brown stew, thick enough that your spoon might almost stand upright in it. It is a concentrated mass of carbohydrates and fiber, built from the hardiest crops that survived the autumn harvest. You see the softened hulls of barley and rye, and the mushy, disintegrated remains of dried peas and beans. These legumes are vital. They provide the protein that will help your body repair itself, but more importantly, they are slow-burning fuel. They take hours to digest, and in that long, slow process of breaking down, your metabolism will generate the heat that keeps your blood moving when the room temperature drops below freezing. You lift the bowl with both hands, using the warmth of the wood to thaw your palms before you even take a bite. When you finally taste it, the heat is the most prominent flavor. It sears your tongue and then travels down your throat like a glowing coal, spreading a bloom of warmth through your chest. There might be a bit of salted bacon in there if it is a good day, or perhaps some leeks and onions that have been softened into a sweet, pungent paste. But mostly it is grain. This is the fuel of the masses. You eat until you are more than full, pushing past the point of mere satisfaction until your stomach feels heavy and distended. This heaviness is a comfort. It is a sign that you have stored enough energy to power your internal furnace through the 10 hours of darkness that lie ahead. But the pottage is only half of the equation. To your right sits a leather jack or a wooden tankard filled with ale. In your world, ale is not an indulgence or a social lubricant for the weekends. It is liquid bread. It is safer to drink than the water from the frozen well, which might be tainted by the runoff of the farmyard, and it is far more nutritious. This ale is thick, cloudy, and slightly sweet, lacking the clear sparkle of modern filtered beer. It is full of active yeast and dissolved grain solids. As you take a long pull, the slight alcohol content begins to work on your nervous system. It does not truly warm you despite the sensation, but it does something equally important. It dilates the small blood vessels near your skin, giving you a temporary flush of warmth, and more crucially, it begins to dull the sharp edges of the cold. The stinging in your toes feels a bit further away. The shivering that has been racking your shoulders for hours begins to subside into a dull, manageable thrum. You are practicing a form of medieval science, though you would not call it that. You understand through centuries of inherited wisdom that a man who goes to bed hungry is a man who may not wake up when the frost is thick on the floorboards. The heat of the fire is fleeting. Once you bank the coals and climb into your straw mattress, that external heat will vanish within the hour. But the heat of the pottage and the ale is yours to keep. It is a metabolic fire that burns within your gut. Consider the physics of what you are doing. As you sit there in the flickering light of a single tallow candle, your body is working overtime. The process of digestion, especially the digestion of complex grains and fibers, is an exothermic reaction. It generates physical heat as a byproduct. By eating a massive, calorie-dense meal immediately before you prepare for sleep, you are ensuring that your core temperature remains stable even as the air around you turns to ice. You are tunneling your stomach into a hot water bottle that stays warm for half the night. You watch your family members doing the same. Your children are scraping the bottoms of their bowls, their faces flushed from the steam. There is a quietness that settles over the room as the food takes effect. The frantic energy of the day, the rushing to finish chores before the light fails, is replaced by a heavy, lethargic contentment. This is the lethargy of survival. In the winter, you move slowly to conserve every scrap of heat. You eat until you are drowsy, allowing the blood to move away from your extremities and toward your core, where it can be heated by the furnace of your digestion. You might have a small piece of dark, rye bread to soak up the last of the liquid in your bowl. This bread is hard, almost like a stone, and must be dunked into the pottage or the ale to be edible. It is sour and gritty, often containing bits of chaff or even tiny fragments of stone from the grist mill. Yet, as you chew it, you feel the strength returning to your limbs. You are building a layer of internal insulation that no wool cloak can match. If you are fortunate enough to live in a household with a few more resources, there might be a bit of fat added to the pot. A spoonful of lard or a bit of butter is a treasure in the winter. Fat is the most dense form of energy available to you. It slows down the digestion of the grains even further, stretching out the heat production over a longer period. It coats your throat and your stomach, providing a sense of richness that makes the meager surroundings feel less hostile. In the Middle Ages, fat is life. It is the gold of the winter pantry. As you finish your ale, you feel a deep, grounding warmth. It is not just the physical temperature of the food, but the chemical energy now coursing through your veins. You are ready to face the transition from the hearth to the bed. You know that in a few minutes you will have to leave the circle of the fire and climb into a bed that will feel as cold as a grave for the first 10 minutes. But you are armed. Your blood is thick with calories. Your stomach is a heavy, warm weight that will anchor you in the darkness. There is a psychological component to this as well. The winter is a time of scarcity and fear. The howling wind outside the stone walls or the timber frame of your house tells stories of spirits and wolves, of the long dark that never ends. But a full stomach is a rebuttal to that fear. It is a signal to your brain that you have conquered the day, that you have gathered enough from the earth to sustain your life for one more night. This sense of fullness allows you to slip into sleep rather than lying awake, shivering and counting the hours until dawn. You stand up, feeling the weight of the meal in your limbs. The floor is cold against your feet, but the core of your body is radiating heat. You move toward the sleeping area, where the straw is piled high and the heavy wool blankets wait. You are not just a person lying down to rest. You are a biological engine, fueled and stoked, ready to idle through the freezing hours. The pottage and the ale are now part of you, circulating in your blood, keeping your heart beating steady and your breath warm in the frozen air. You crawl into the bedding, and as you pull the covers up to your chin, you feel that internal glow. The world outside may be turning to white and iron, but inside the shell of your skin, the fire you just swallowed is still burning bright. This is how you win. This is how you turn the simple act of eating into a wall of defense that the winter cannot breach. You close your eyes, the taste of rye and yeast still on your tongue, and let the heavy warmth of the meal carry you down into a deep, protected slumber. The first thing you notice is not the light, but the sound. For months, the world has been muffled, wrapped in a heavy, suffocating blanket of white that swallowed every footstep and deadened every shout. But this morning, there is a new rhythm. It is a persistent, rhythmic drumming. A steady drip, drip, drip sounds against the thick thatch of your roof. It is the sound of the ice finally surrendering. The great frost is breaking. You lie there for a moment, still encased in the familiar weight of wool and fur, and listen. The air inside the cottage is still cold, but it has lost that jagged, crystalline edge that makes every breath feel like a shallow cut to the lungs. There is a heaviness to the atmosphere now, a humidity that speaks of melting snow and softening earth. You reach a hand out from beneath the covers. Usually, this movement is a frantic dash to pull your arm back into the warmth, But today you let your skin linger in the open air. The chill is damp rather than dry. You sit up slowly, your joints creaking in sympathy with the timber frames of the house. Your body feels heavy, laden with the lethargy of a long hibernation. For months, your life has been measured by the radius of the hearth fire and the length of a candle wick. Now, as you look toward the small, shuttered opening that serves as your window, you see a thin, pale sliver of gray light dancing where the wood does not quite meet the stone. It is not the brilliant gold of midsummer, but it is stronger than anything you have seen since November. As you swing your legs out of the bed, your feet find the floor. The rushes beneath your toes feel different. During the height of winter, they were dry and brittle, snapping like frozen twigs. Now, they feel slightly limp, absorbing the moisture that is beginning to seep up from the ground and settle in the low spots of the dirt floor. You pull on your tunic and your heavy wool hosen, but for the first time in weeks you do not reach for your thickest cloak immediately. You move toward the hearth. The embers from the night before are a dull, pulsing orange, buried deep in a bed of white ash. You stir them, but you do not pile on the massive logs you used during the January gales. A few handfuls of kindling and a smaller branch will suffice. The fire catches, and the smoke rises straight and true toward the roof. You walk to the door. This is a moment of profound significance in the medieval calendar, though it is not marked by any feast or ceremony. It is the first time you pull back the heavy leather weather stripping and lift the wooden latch with the intention of letting the outside in. As the door creaks open, the smell hits you. It is the scent of the medieval spring, and it is not entirely pleasant. It is the smell of wet wool, of old smoke, and of the sudden, sharp release of everything that has been frozen for 3 months. You smell the muck of the stables, the damp rot of the woodpile, and beneath it all, the cold, metallic scent of the waking earth. You step over the threshold, and your boots sink instantly into a thick, sucking mud. This is the reality of the thaw. The beautiful, pristine snow that once covered the village has turned into a treacherous, grayish slush. The paths are no longer firm. They are keys of mire that threaten to pull the shoes right off your feet. You look around the village and you see your neighbors doing the same. There is no cheering, no great celebration. Instead, there is a quiet, weary nodding of heads. You have survived. You have reached the other side of the dark. But waking to the spring is not merely a relief. It is a call to grueling labor. The lethargy of the winter sleep must be shaken off quickly, for the land is unforgiving to those who linger in bed. You look at your hands. They are pale and the skin is soft from a season of indoor tasks. Soon, they will be mapped with new calluses, stained with the dark grease of the plow and the grit of the soil. You walk toward the lean-to where the tools are kept. Your plowshare, your hoes, and your spades have been sitting in the shadows, perhaps gathering a fine layer of orange rust. You run a finger over the cold iron. In a few days, when the ground has drained enough to be workable, you will be behind the oxen, breaking the sod that has been locked in ice since the feast of St. Nicholas. The transition of your sleeping habits is perhaps the most jarring change. During the winter, you slept long and deep, often for 12 hours or more, rising only when the sun forced its way above the horizon. Now, the sun is waking up earlier, and so must you. The church bells, which seemed to ring into a void during the snowstorms, now carry clearly across the damp fields. They call you to matins and then to the work of the day. You find that you are no longer retreating to your bed as soon as the sun sets. The twilight lingers just a little longer each evening, a bruised purple sky that invites you to stay outdoors, checking the fences or clearing the debris that the winter winds have scattered across your yard. However, this period of waking is also a time of deep physical trial. This is the season of the hungry gap. The stores of grain you worked so hard to protect are running low. The salted meats are down to the gristle and the bone. The root vegetables in the cellar are beginning to sprout pale, ghostly tentacles, or they are softening into a fermented mush. While your spirit is waking up to the promise of the sun, your stomach is beginning to feel the true pinch of the medieval year. This is why the season of Lent, with its fasts and restrictions, fits so perfectly into the natural rhythm of the Middle Ages. You are not just fasting for the sake of your soul. You are fasting because the earth has not yet begun to give back what it took away in the autumn. You spend your first waking hours of the spring cleaning. This is not the light dusting of a modern home. This is a battle against the physical residue of winter survival. You and your family carry the bedding outside. You drape the heavy woolen blankets over the fences, beating them with sticks to drive out the dust, the soot, and the various small creatures that have shared your warmth during the freezing nights. You strip the old, foul-smelling rushes from the floor and carry them to the dung heap, exposing the bare earth of your home to the fresh air for the first time in months. You scrub the soot from the stones of the hearth. The house feels cold and cavernous without its winter clutter, but there is a profound sense of renewal in the emptiness. As the sun climbs higher, you feel its warmth on the back of your neck. It is a weak sun, still struggling against the lingering chill of the north wind, but it is enough. You see the first green shoots of the hardy weeds pushing through the melting slush near the stone walls. You hear the birds, their songs sharp and frantic as they begin the work of nesting. The silence of the winter is truly dead. You look back at your bed, the place that was your sanctuary, your fortress, and your prison for the last 4 months. It looks different in the honest, gray light of a March morning. It is just a wooden frame, some straw, and a pile of worn furs. The magic of the winter sleep, that heavy, dreamless state that protected you from the howling gales, is fading. Your body is remembering its purpose. You feel the pull of the fields, the demand of the livestock, and the heavy responsibility of the coming growing season. You take a deep breath, feeling the damp, earthy air fill your chest. Your lungs feel expanded, cleared of the stale smoke of the winter hearth. You are no longer a creature of the firelight, huddled against the dark. You are a creature of the sun and the soil once again. You pick up your spade, feeling the familiar weight of the ashwood handle, and you step out into the mud. The long sleep is over. The medieval spring has arrived, not with a flourish of trumpets, but with the steady, relentless drip of melting ice and the first difficult steps of a world beginning to move again. You walk toward the edge of your village, your eyes fixed on the horizon, ready to meet the labor that will sustain you until the frost returns to claim the land once more.